back to the Real Recovery Show. We're joined here every week. Our episodes air on Fridays at noon. And here's my dog. This is Bear. He just had surgery, so he's joining us here in the studio. Today's episode is on Narcan, and we have two people who train people in the use of Narcan, as well as provide free Narcans to anybody who needs it. But first, we're going to talk about what is Narcan and what's the need for it. About a week ago, there was an overdose at the meeting space, and it was after hours. We have a can of Narcan in the recovery store, but it was not helpful because this was when the recovery store was closed, and so it was at a 9 o'clock meeting at night, Narcotics Anonymous. And the person who OD'd is alive, mortified but alive, and is 21 years old. And his girlfriend was there, and she was very helpful, and she was sober. And it just was, it was something that prompted a conversation about, what can we do to have cans of Narcan available? And if we did have cans of Narcan, how would we make it available, and how would people know how to use it? So we thought of all these ideas, like putting them in everybody's locker and then telling everybody they should keep one in the locker, which is a good idea. And then we thought of, writing up a whole thing on when they should do it or when they could do it. And it just really felt like I don't know enough about that to be telling people. And I also said that there are lots of meetings, as we think we have like 114 meetings at the meeting space, but it's a wide variety. And a lot of those meetings are also not meetings necessarily that you would expect somebody to show up and go into the bathroom and OD. But one of my friends who was speaking to me that night said, you know what? You don't know. Anybody could at any moment overdose. And this is true. Plus, we have Nar-Anon meetings and Al-Anon meetings, and it would probably be a really good idea for them to be educated, especially if they are around active or potentially active addiction. And so it's been interesting. So somebody ended up contacting our friends over at Foundation for Recovery, and next thing you know, Ron contacts me, and he's wanting to do some classes, provide a whole bunch of cans, and I'm so excited. And so we found times on the schedule to do that. But why don't we do a show on this before we do the classes so that we can really educate the community? And it's just been a really fascinating topic that's come up from that. A little history, because I like to qualify. I like everybody that comes on the episode to qualify. What is our background around this? Why is this so important? One of my main addictions was pain pills, and it's one of my favorite of my main addictions. And it's the one that if I ever have to have surgery is like my biggest issue. I one time well into recovery, like years and years and years into recovery, had a situation. I had to have surgery, and I told the doctors, I have addiction, and so they came up with a whole plan in the surgery, and they were gonna pump me up full of pain medication beforehand, so I wasn't gonna physically have it, but then they were gonna have to give me some. But I was okay. I was married to a man at the time. I was gonna give him the pills. He was gonna hold on to it. All was gonna be right with the world. And there it was. I was standing. I was somewhere through almost all of what I was supposed to go through, but I still had several days left, and I was standing and I was having a conversation that was funnier than it was funny. And I realized I was clicking on it, and I was like, God, I have to get off faster than the doctor recommended, because I know myself, and my addict mind is starting to work on how I can have more of this and why it's a good idea. It was starting to give me the checklist of where even my meditations are better. And I was just like, oh God, this is not cool, So, I came off of it, and I had half a bottle left, and my ex-husband had to fly to Houston, Texas, and so his very important job, was to take the pills and to get rid of them. And so that was unfortunately not what happened. I ended up talking to somebody who was in the middle of a relapse, on pain medicine, ironically. And I was talking to her, and on the phone, I get off the phone, I walk back into the house, and they're on the counter by the sink. And man, what one little tiny bottle can have the power to do. It was like one of those country westerns where you have like the two people, dun dun dun, and who wants to like pull a gun first, because I felt like the world froze, and that was all that mattered. It was in that moment. And I felt like I was fighting something. Like I didn't know how my mind was like, I can give it to a neighbor because I still valued them. So I thought like somebody would want them, which is stupid and crazy and sick. But I'm telling you, that's the kind of thinking that you have when you have addiction. But also, now here's somebody who's in recovery, by the way. So just to remind you, in case you couldn't tell that. And then I'm like, I'll put him down the garbage disposal. And I struggled, and it took my strength. Like it just took everything to put it down the sink, to put it down the sink. And later on, I told somebody about this, and they're like, oh my God, you're poisoning the water, da 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 da. And I was like, let me tell you, if I didn't do that, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. And so that's how powerful it could be. Even when you've gone years without even being active in addiction. I've also seen people in addiction, in different programs who their only drug of choice was alcohol, and then they have their first surgery, and they're cocky and arrogant and ignorant. And not saying that everybody who's an alcoholic is going to get addicted to pain pills, but I've seen so many people who think that they're just alcoholics get addicted to pain pills, and not even tell the doctor out of embarrassment, or just, like I said, ignorance in the moment, or, whatever, not wanting to tell them, hey, listen, I'm a little bit of an addict and you might want to be careful with me. And yeah, so I've seen people have to reset their sobriety dates because of pain pills. Like it should be taken seriously. Now that's just when somebody's prescribing it to you, right? That's not even what's happening on the streets. And so we'll get into that today. So joined here with me is, of course, on almost every episode, is Tay Singer.
Hi.
Who has her own experience with pain pills. Yeah. And also joined with me is Ron Schnazy. Did I say your name right? Oh, yep, perfect. Who is going to talk about his experience as well and what got him into working in the field with treatment recovery. And Hortensia. And she's also going to talk about her experience with even family members who have struggled with addiction. And so we'll start off with you, Tay. Okay. You can share a little bit first.
Yeah. So I would have said my DOC or drug of choice was opiates. I didn't know that at first. When I came into recovery, I mean, I was super young, which we've talked about before, but I remember talking to somebody about how, like, I never did heroin, and they were like, but didn't you crush up pills and snort them? And I'm like, right. Well, yeah. Like, I didn't realize it was the same thing even, right. And so it's pretty interesting at this point, 15 years later. But when I was 19, a friend of mine who I'd known since I was 5 OD'd on pain pills. And he had gotten the pain pills from a surgery. And so, I mean, like, it's kind of been something that's affected my life for over 20 years, and, it's just part of the story, and I feel like it's a part of a lot of people's stories. But I used to get my pills from other people that had surgeries, or, right. Or at parties. I remember the first time I did pills, I was in 6th grade. I was 12 years old. And a friend of mine, a guy that liked me, told me that he could get me some pills from his mom's cabinet. And so he gave me this bottle of pills, and I didn't know what was in them. I to this day don't know what was in them, because they were different colors and different pills. And every day I would try a different pill, and I'd be like, oh, I like the blue ones best. Like, I had no idea what I took at that time. And so, like, yeah, for me, opioids was a pretty big part of my story.
Okay. So. Awesome. Thank you. And Ron?
Well, for me, lived experience with substance use disorder myself. I wasn't much of an opiate user. I always say I only smoked heroin 6 or 7 times. Right.
That's it.
That's it.
That's
that's
so
all.
cute.
But I've been in the treatment field. Most of my friends that I kept around me when I was using were opiate users, and just been heavily involved since I got into recovery within the treatment field, and now the past 2 years over at Foundation for Recovery, working for the recovery side of things.
Okay, awesome, very cool. And Hortensia, your last name, pronounce it DeJesus?
Yeah.
Oh my God!
Oh my God. You got
That's like my biggest accomplishment in the show right now. Go ahead.
Well, I am, the adult child of multiple people in my family system that have substance use disorder. That's just how it works with addiction. Opiates in particular, really affected my family with a son. And that was an unknown, I know, to me and to many people who understand addiction. But what do you do, when it's a child and, one thing leads to another, they can't afford pills, and luckily I found out from somebody that, that he was smoking heroin. And I feel lucky today that I got that information, because then I can reach out and say, there's another way.
Is he okay now? Or
Yeah.
He is?
Yeah.
Did he get into recovery, or?
No.
But he's recovering. Yeah. Like he's moving on with his life. And how old is he now?
That was 10 years ago.
10 years ago.
And he has, a wonderful life and a wonderful daughter. Who would have imagined it? I sure didn't. But, he did get treatment for it. And, it was really, really tough and sad, and so many unknowns with opiates, especially when it's, a child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Okay. Well, if you don't know the different types of opioids, there's heroin, fentanyl, there's oxycodone, hydrocodone, there's Vicodin, codeine, morphine, and it's kind of interesting because we, as a society now, like through COVID, through the whole, the uptick in marijuana use, a lot of us have been focusing on, there is a recovery program for marijuana. We had a meeting at the meeting space. It didn't last, but we get calls all the time for marijuana. And of course, when people are talking about, drug addiction, we steer them to usually to Narcotics Anonymous. Sometimes if they have like a specific drug addiction, like crystal meth, there's a crystal meth anonymous, etc. But fentanyl has become a big, big issue. And what's interesting about fentanyl is it's 50 to 100 times stronger than morphine. And so if you haven't had any experience, but you've been in the hospital and you've had morphine, I mean, it's so strong. And it was first created in the 60s, and it was used for the treatment of pain and cancer treatments. And so what has happened, though, is a lot of people who have started to use fentanyl didn't know that they were using fentanyl. It's cheap and it's so strong, and so it started to be used to cut other drugs. And honestly, from what I understand from all my research, is that a lot of times they wouldn't even say, of course, that that's what you're getting too.
Right.
They would just act like you're getting such a really good dose of heroin, let's just say. Like this is the supreme stuff, and people would end up with these addictions to something that they didn't even know what they were getting addicted to because of it. And that's pretty scary. There's a lot of young people too that are overdosing on this, and they're going straight for fentanyl now too. Just go straight for it. It's cheap. It's unfortunately getting easier and easier to get. And so like, and none of this, honestly, I didn't before having the meeting space, before all the stuff that's happening, before seeing people die, before the person overdosing, before the conversation, before the research, it wasn't anything that was in my experience personally.
Right.
Fentanyl that I knew of. And so this is a really important conversation. Usually people, when you're using Narcan on somebody, is it usually because of like a fentanyl overdose, or are you finding like a wide variety of overdosing that's happening that you're finding people using the Narcan for? Is it mainly or mostly fentanyl, you'd say?
So fentanyl is definitely one of the main reasons that we are promoting the Narcan today, of course, but Narcan can be used to reverse the effects of any opiate. And I want to stress that again, it's for an opiate overdose. It helps reverse that.
Right.
So
would you say though, if for opioids that they are like, if they're going to overdose a lot of times with like pain pills and stuff, that maybe it's an intentional overdose, but maybe somebody who overdoses on something like that's so easy to overdose on, like fentanyl, would be like an unintentional one, like they're just trying to get high?
So there is that, but also, there's individuals who use the pain medication as prescribed, but they might forget that they took a pill.
Right.
And they might double up on dosage,
Right. Especially like the elderly.
Yes.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
So.
Wow, that is pretty interesting.
And that could happen very quickly. I had a friend who just had a baby and has not used any substances for a long, long time. And she had her surgery, and she was giving pain meds, obviously, because she just had like cesarean section. And she said to me, she was like, I don't know if I can stay on this. She was like, I couldn't even remember whether I just fed my baby. And we're talking like 3 or 4 doses.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's one of the, the instant negative effects of using a substance like opioids.
Yeah.
Interesting. So you need to also know like that there are certain symptoms that somebody will have and show, and some of the characteristics of an opioid overdose are that they can have very small pupils, they can have slower, shallow breathing. The breathing is one of the biggest things that's affected by fentanyl use. Vomiting, inability to speak, a faint heartbeat, limp arms and legs. They could show either that they just not responsive at all or looking like they're in and out of it. And unconsciousness. They can have pale skin. They can have purple lips and nails, their fingernails, and it's not necessarily all of those, right? So when you guys, when you do your trainings and you are telling people what the telltale signs are for you to look for when you need to pull out the can and become the hero for the moment, what are the signs that you say, look for those?
Well, I always tell people to remember the acronym BLUE. Breathing, lips, unresponsive, eyes. The breathing is going to be very shallow. Somebody overdosing can have as few as 6 breaths per minute.
Wow.
You might hear what's called the death rattle. If you ever heard that before, it's a very unique sound. The L is for the lips. Like you said, the lips will be purple. They might be blue. Depending on their complexion, they might even be a light to ashy gray. So it'll be an unearthly color. They'll be unresponsive to stimulation, such as shaking them, calling their name, trying to wake them up, and their eyes will be a pinpoint dilation.
So it's interesting. I'm trying to picture the kid. I could say he's a kid at 21. He's on 51. But I'm trying to picture, I don't remember his lips being dark.
So that's why we tell people to
But being passed out in the bathroom was the telltale sign.
Typically, yes. But that's why we tell people definitely look at the eyes. The pinpoint dilation is definitely a sign. Interesting.
And in your trainings, do you have like pictures of somebody's eyes being dilated, of like exactly how dilated they would need to be like that kind of overdose and not just high?
So in my trainings, no. Usually when I'm doing an outreach, I'm just out there at an outreach event doing it on the street or in a resource fair. So it's more the quick and dirty. So I just go over the symptoms, But, we have an hour-long training, overdose prevention training at Foundation for Recovery that has a lot more data, statistics,
And we're going to be
and
having it at the
information.
meeting space too.
Yes, we are. We're going to be bringing it to you.
Yay!
Those pinpoint eyes, it's just so clear because
Yeah,
it looks
it's
like
obvious.
the point of a pen,
Yeah.
Yeah.
or a pencil,
Wow.
really.
Yeah.
It's that small.
Wow.
And when I was doing treatment, working in treatment, that was one of the things I can tell right away. Okay,
Interesting.
this is going to be opioid related intake, et cetera, et cetera.
I've never
Can
seen
tell.
up close somebody ODing and look in their eyes. I've seen somebody either super high, where like, hey, they're not here. Is this on? And then and unfortunately people die. But I've never actually seen it up close. So it's really good that you're going to prepare people to know what to do. And okay, and so can anybody administer Narcan then? Like, is it just anybody? Does anybody need to have any special qualifications or training, or is it super easy? It's a nasal spray, right?
Yeah,
It's
It's-
super easy.
right there.
Can you see that?
Easy.
Yeah, there you go.
Got a little bit of light reflection, but yes, just that simple, that easy. It's a nasal spray. They do have an injectable intramuscular as well, and hospitals operate on an intravenous form of Narcan. So,
Okay.
We like for everybody to have training.
Right.
We would like that, but to save somebody's life, we'll do the quick and dirty training, which is these are the signs, put the, how to give them the nasal dosage, and then, how to lay them down. And really, we can do it in no time. The full training will get into a little bit more detail about calling 911, prior to starting your rescue, et cetera, because it won't last that long, and you need them to be there.
yes.
And what if you think somebody is overdosing, but they're not really overdosing on something? Can it cause any harm?
So Narcan is only an opiate antagonist. It only attacks the opiates that are in the receptors in your brain. It's not going to have an interaction if somebody is having a stroke, seizure, something like that. Because it is a medication, there is a very minuscule risk that they might have an allergic reaction. I have not seen a documented case yet, but it is a medication, so we have to mention that. Honestly, though, I'd rather have somebody, break out in a few hives and survive.
Okay, well, thank you very much. When we come back, we are going to talk about Narcan. We're going to get into detail about it, and we're going to show you how you can get some yourself to help people. Remember that the opinions expressed here are strictly those of the people who gave them and do not represent any 12-step program or should replace your own intuition or professional medical advice. See you in a bit. Welcome back to the Real Recovery Show. Here's my show mascot again. He was laying down this whole time and then he got up. But anyway, hope you enjoyed the break. So now we're back. We're going to talk about Narcan. Narcan is from naloxone. It was originated in the 1960s by Jack Fishman for cancer pain treatment. And over the years, when was it approved for opioid addiction?
1971.
1971, and then I'm going to test them, and then And then but you still needed a prescription, or you needed somebody to inject it, right? You couldn't just get it yourself easily.
Yeah, you had to have like a doctor or a nurse practitioner. I mean, like it was, or an EMT. Like it wasn't in public use.
Okay.
Absolutely. And it wasn't until November 2015 that the nasal even was available.
Right.
And states,
in what year?
2015,
Yeah,
November
2015.
2015.
Yeah. So Roger Crystal, who's a doctor, who he invented it. He initially was trying to steer it for use for, believe it or not, food addiction. It seems that in binging, that it actually stimulates the opioid receptors in the brain. So that's pretty interesting for me, having had food addiction. But he saw a greater need to steer it towards opioid addiction and overdose, specifically even for fentanyl. And so there was a really cool story. I found this out. I loved this. About a year ago, he was driving with his wife Michelle, and he saw somebody passed out on the side of the road. And so he pulled over, and Michelle called 911, and he immediately pulled out a can of Narcan and administered it. And when the paramedics came, they took the woman, and they ended up administering more of the Narcan, and said that, of course, that he saved, her life. And so it's amazing that something like this is now so readily available for people to be able to help people with, all because of his painstaking effort to formulate it into a nasal spray, and to help and to get it approved by the FDA, and for now the laws to have shifted for people to be able to get the help they need right in the moment. Yes. God, we probably what is it like? They said something like I don't remember the number, but for everybody who has a traffic accident, who dies in a traffic accident, there's way more a year from fentanyl overdose. It's crazy. It's not
even close.
It's an epidemic.
It's an epidemic. We had 107,000 people die last year, and we should be mortified by that.
Right.
By that number, and we know it's going to be, a whole lot more in 2022, and I think it'll be shocking enough that maybe there will be some type of national initiative that will change, where we're going with this.
I hope so too.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
I mean, if you look at the trajectory of opioid addiction in the United States, I mean, we've all seen the show on Netflix, Dope Sick. This isn't a new thing that we're dealing with. It's just worse now. It just keeps getting worse and worse and worse because drugs keep getting more potent and potent and potent.
Yes.
Right.
That's what scares me. I looked into odmap.org. And in this zip code alone, for where we're recording this, in the last between July of 2022 and October of 2022, there were 45 overdoses just in this zip code.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mm-mm. Yeah, there's some scary stuff, not just for people who are recreationally using drugs, but for some of the possible terrorist applications for stuff like fentanyl. Where people can end up getting drugged and they don't even know that they're getting drugged. Unfortunately, it's just sick. But this is really powerful because so Narcan is an opioid antagonist. Naloxone is the opioid antagonist, and Narcan is the vehicle, a nasal spray. But what that means is it attaches to the receptors. So you have opioid receptors in the brain, and now I can't even say it. Naloxone will actually plug into those receptors, and it will block other drugs in the system, other opioids, from being able to do that. So it could actually, you can have fentanyl in your system, you can have heroin in your system. They're trying to plug into those receptors, and they can't because naloxone is plugging into those receptors. And so because of that, it can kind of stay the drug from having an effect, and you can reverse some of the effects, like you can start to see the breathing come back, etc. What I find so fascinating is that different opioids have different half-lives, meaning how long it takes before it's metabolized out of your body. And so where you have heroin has about the same half-life as how long it takes for naloxone. They're about an hour and a half. Fentanyl can take up to 7 hours, which means that fentanyl will stay in the system, constantly trying to plug into these receptors. And so somebody getting a dose of naloxone through Narcan could end up, staying the symptoms and the effects of it. But at the same time, it's not going to necessarily fix it. Like, call 911, get help, be ready to administer another one. And Ron's going to talk about how many doses sometimes you have to give to a person because they have that much in their system, or the type of opioids that they have in their system. So how amazing that there's now this available. Like, it blows my mind that people can be armed with something to help like this. So when Roger Crystal and his wife were there and they helped her, he was interviewed by NBC News. And he said, if you see someone unresponsive lying on the street in this country, it is an opioid overdose until proven otherwise. And so if you see somebody who's passed out, or if you know anybody who could possibly be in any kind of addiction use, or even like what you mentioned earlier, it could be somebody that never even did a drug. It's not a bad idea to come and learn how to use this and to be ready to administer it to save somebody's life. It's free. The class is free. The can is free. The fentanyl strips, the test strips are free. And it's amazing that all this can be made available by a great place like Foundation for Recovery. So now we're going to talk about that whole process of testing, seeing, going through the whole thing. If you can kind of go through what you would talk about in your trainings, both of you, that would be awesome.
Absolutely. Did you want me to start with the Narcan?
Sure.
All right. So we already discussed about the symptoms and signs of an opiate overdose. Remember the acronym BLUE: breathing, lips, unresponsive, and eyes. So the first thing you're going to do if you suspect that it is an opiate overdose, or even if the person is just unresponsive altogether, first thing you're going to do is call 911. Let them know you got somebody who's barely breathing and unresponsive. That usually trips the call right up to the top of the queue, because the longer the brain goes without oxygen, the more danger it can be in, of course. So you're going to keep 911 on the phone, and you're going to let the person know, all right, I'm going to hit you with Narcan. Open up the Narcan, and then when you open up the Narcan, really easy to pop open, place it up one nostril, push the red plunger all the way, and that is one full dose of Narcan. After you do that, you're going to roll the person into what's called the recovery position. People who've taken CPR or first aid training are familiar with this. They roll them onto their left side like this with their knee crooked to prevent them from rocking back and forth, because Narcan or naloxone will send somebody into withdrawal the moment they start coming around. Part of withdrawal symptoms can be vomiting, disorientation, stuff like that. So after 10 to 30 seconds of administering Narcan, person might start coming out of their overdose. They'll be groggy. They might not be in the best of moods because, of course, they're in withdrawal. Like, I'd rather have somebody withdrawing.
So duck if they want to swing at you.
Yes. And just orient them, let them know the paramedics are on their way. They're going to be there soon. You'll feel better. All right. Then they might not wake up after the first dose, though. Of course, like you'd mentioned, the stronger the opiate, the more doses it does seem to be taking. That's why in every kit you get 2 Narcan.
Oh, nice.
And you administer the first one, 10 to 30 seconds, they might start coming around. If they're not coming around after 2 minutes, take out the second dose, put it in the opposite nostril, press the plunger again all the way. You don't have to jam it up there. It'll fit just nice and snug. Just, don't.
They won't feel it if you're jamming it anyway.
True.
You don't have to.
Very true.
Be nice.
Is the nasal spray as effective as the injection?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is as effective. Now, like I said, each kit only has 2. So the second one goes up the nostril. That's probably going to carry you another 2 minutes. If you have more doses, great. Alternate nostrils every 2 minutes until paramedics arrive. If not, typical response time. You saw typical response time is about 5.5 minutes anyway. So by the time you administer the second dose, paramedics should be getting on scene.
Yeah.
Let them know, hey, I hit this person with 2 Narcan. I suspected an overdose. Let them take over from there. They're the professionals. You know.
Can anybody get in trouble for administering Narcan?
So
No.
I don't know. I mean, Liz, like if the police come and you did what? Leave it up to the professionals. You know, like I don't know. I have to ask these questions.
That would be like
Yeah.
somebody getting in trouble for CPR.
Well, I kind of feel like, you know, what are some of the reasons why somebody might balk or hesitate or be afraid to learn this and to take matters into their own hands, right? If they feel like they're afraid they're going to hurt somebody or they're afraid they're going to get into trouble.
Yeah.
Correct? Yeah. So I think it's a valid question.
It is a valid
Nobody likes it,
question.
but
It's a valid question. We have a Good Samaritan law here in Nevada. So
There you
you
go.
will not get in trouble for
Okay.
providing Narcan or any of those types of measures here. But yes, people are afraid. People are afraid, you know, that they may get in trouble for using substances. You know, if they're providing life-saving measures to their buddy who they were using with. So there is a lot of that that occurs. But, you know, these guys are coming in to help rescue. They're not focused on the other people that are there. And so I encourage people to just have it available, especially the at-risk. I mean, that's something that we're really driving home is like, let us give this to the families and to the person who's using and to their friends. I would tell my friends, have it in your car, give it to the boyfriend, give it to the grandma, just give it to everybody. Have it available. You just never know.
How long does it last if you were to have it in the counter, like in the cabinet or wherever, you know, you keep it in your car? Like how long before it starts to like lose its efficacy?
So this has an expiration of March 2025.
Oh,
of
that's
course.
pretty good.
It's been shown to even have efficacy up to 10 years post expiration date.
Okay.
It's a medication, so they of course have to have an expiration date on it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You know, and then keep in mind also that, you know, this is only if they're having an opioid like overdose. So if they're having an overdose with anything else, like if they took sleeping pills, right, and they drank a lot, it's not necessarily going to do anything. It's going to at least narrow down what it could be, but but that's it. So that's awesome.
Well, one of the interesting things I think that he was going to talk about was the strips, because they did mention that the giving, you know, the family everything.
Yes.
And these strips are pretty interesting.
Yeah, so like I was going to show, we do have these fentanyl test strips for individuals to test their product, or I commonly give it to family members, or, you know, when I'm out doing the outreach, I'm like, here, take this. If you go to a music festival, you might know somebody who just has a little bit of fun on the weekends, very recreational use. Test your product. It takes minimal product. There's two different ways to test, one for a pill and one for powder. But it takes literally the amount of powder to cover Abe Lincoln's head on a penny. So I'd let them know, hey, it takes just that little bit just to possibly save your life.
Yes, I would love to snort this with you. Will you give me a moment?
Yes.
I'm just going to test this one little bit. Thank you. You know?
Yeah, I have a friend who, you know, who says his new mantra when it comes to drug use, and especially young people, is, and a lot of you might know him, he says there's no such thing as experimentation anymore.
Right.
Parents have to know that.
Yeah.
Because the first time they experiment, they can absolutely die.
Yeah.
It's just too risky now.
Yeah. And everybody's different too. Just because one person can tolerate one thing doesn't mean the next person can.
Well, that's when it comes into a lot of things we discuss is about those counterfeit pills. There's a lot of counterfeit pills floating around, and a lot of teenagers and that go out to house parties and they try a pill. There was plenty of actual cases, but one in particular. A dad let his daughter go out. She was 17, maybe smoked a little bit of pot here and there through high school, never really partied, and she went to a party with her friends. They all bought what they thought were one kind of pill, and they all took it. All of her friends, you know, went home. She went home and never woke up. Her pill was a hot pill that had just enough fentanyl in it to kill her.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's a one and done. And you don't know because these counterfeit pills look exactly like the real thing.
One and done is really key.
Yeah.
It really is. There's the risk is just way too high.
And it's not advocating drug use. It's not
No.
saying go ahead and do drug use, just go ahead and here you could just use this. But it's basically saying we know that if you're going to be doing it, and we would prefer if you're going to be safer in it. It's kind of like with the whole like handing out free condoms, to the kids. It's like, well, we're not telling you to go out and have sex with everyone. But should you have sex, could you at least take these condoms?
Or like when HIV was
Yes.
running rampant and they were giving out free needles,
Yes.
because it was a crisis that needed to be addressed. And while we can't help everyone get clean, we can help them be a little bit safer in it.
Yeah, and we can help mitigate the fallout from, like you said about the HIV and Hep C epidemic. The safe syringe exchange programs are still a very common thing, and they're an excellent addition to the harm reduction. Harm reduction basically knows that, okay, it understands there is licit and illicit use of drugs. Let's just face that fact. Get it real, get it right. We understand it's going on. Like you said, we just want, if somebody is going to use, we want them to be safe. I always say dead people can't recover.
No.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and just say no worked real well.
Yeah.
So, we need.
I'm sorry, I thought you were kidding. You are kidding.
When I was working in a rehab, a lot of the clients would wear Dare T-shirts.
Yes.
Because they thought it was so funny.
Yeah.
Didn't work.
Nope.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. I think that its biggest help is if somebody is having an overdose, or maybe, I don't know. It's hard because I've seen people die, and I've seen people who've struggled with addiction and didn't care if they were going to die, and were hoping even that they would die, and then taking a bunch of pills and then waking up the next day pissed because they didn't die.
Yes.
And so it's kind of interesting too with drug addiction and alcoholism. I was one time in this recovery event and people were talking about suicide, right? And so many people were talking about how, they were just addicted to drugs and alcohol. They were never suicidal. And I'm sitting there going, are you kidding? The very fact that you're like throwing caution to the wind and if you die, you die means that you don't really value your life.
Yeah.
And in some way, even if it's like a slow suicide, right? Or a not care if you die kind of suicide, it's still suicide.
Yeah.
Because you're not caring. So we're going to have 2 classes at the meeting space. We're going to have, they're going to be in November coming up. So actually really quickly. And so it's going to be on Saturday and Sunday from 2 to 3 o'clock. It's just an hour. You can come. You can get a free kit, and they'll train you. They'll tell you everything. If anything else, any questions that you have, tell other people to go. It's going to be at the meeting space on November 19th and November 20th in room 104. And if you can't make those dates, you can also contact Foundation for Recovery. And you can say, when can you guys show us how to use it, train us? When do you have classes? When can we pick up more Narcan? Because they really want to help the most people. And they do so many efforts over there to get the word out and to provide these for free, you know?
Do they do trainings like this at people's jobs? Is this something that you guys do all over the place?
Yeah, we trained
Wherever we're
KNPR.
invited.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wherever you're invited.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's
Anywhere.
really good. Yeah.
Well, on average, about 70% of people with substance use disorder, addiction, alcoholism are full-time employed. So we definitely have to get into these employers' spaces and let them know about it. It just is.
I think this is a really good topic anyway, too, because a lot of times, and it's kind of funny that people will trust so blindly a drug that's given to them that they, like you said earlier, don't even know the name of or whatever it is, that it is what the person who's giving it to you or selling it to you is, right? And that nobody's necessarily having the conversation of like, how do you protect yourself in that situation if you should be going down that road right now? But should you get to a place, and it's interesting because after we found out that he was okay, the 21-year-old, and just mortified, just embarrassed, when he was wheeled out on the, when they were wheeling him out of the meeting space, covered in his own urine, like just totally just like, you could tell he had just been through hell. And you find out that they're okay, you find out that they're alive, and your next thought is, I hope this was mortifying enough. I hope, I hope this kid suffered. I really do. I hope this kid suffered so much from whatever he values, that he says, you know what, wake up call. This isn't cute anymore. I got to get some real help.
Yeah.
And sometimes
what's your bottom?
Yeah, and you could think a 21-year-old, how much has that? But kids are using earlier and earlier and earlier now, and stronger stuff than when I was that age.
Well, I told the story about taking pills. I had no idea what they were.
Yeah.
You know, and these pill parties could have fentanyl in them. And when I was little, I was 110 pounds. Like, if I would have gotten a pill of fentanyl at 12 when I was like 90 pounds, like what would have happened? It's just crazy to think about, the potency of this and the fact that these things are available. People need to know that, people need to protect other people.
And that's one of the reasons a lot of people will say to me when I'm trying to train them at an outreach, they're like, oh, no, I don't know anybody who, knows.
Yeah.
And I said, that's okay. The one time I had to use Narcan was in front of a Smith's grocery store. I've been in the field since 2017 and never had to use it professionally. I had to use it on my personal time. And I kept that person
off the clock.
Jesus, what a hero!
Lives off the clock.
But I say that because you never know. Crystal was driving down the street with his wife.
Right.
And it was just on the side of the road. You never know.
That must have felt really good for him, though. Yeah, I know. Just knowing that, the way his life was steered, in what he's focused on, because he was focused on medicine in the United Kingdom, and then he went back to college for business, and then it was this whole thing about, about opioids, and I don't know, I just feel like God, like the God shots, of just seeing where there are solutions and where we just need more education. Well, let's say somebody they go through that process, they get saved by somebody having a Narcan, right? Now it's even more obvious to everybody that is in your life, if you just got saved with Narcan and they're administering to you, that you might have a problem. And hopefully in that moment, you get help. There are many things you can do. What are some of the things for recovery from somebody who does find that, wow, I got so bad, or I put myself in such risk that I put myself in this situation. Now I need to get help. What's the strongest advice to somebody who thinks they might have a problem when it specifically has to do with opioids?
Get treatment right away.
Yeah.
And as many times as possible.
Yeah.
This idea that it's just, one time or twice or three, that's just a myth.
Yeah.
This is a disease that's chronic, it's progressive, potentially fatal. You may need a few episodes of treatment, just like you would for any other disease.
Yeah, depending on how much your body got attached to it. Because
your mind, your mind has been altered.
Yeah.
You talked about that person who was wanting to die. And sometimes that's just where their mind has gone for the moment. If we can keep them safe until they can regain their thinking back and their emotions back and their feelings back, that probably won't be the case.
I've been homeless. Tay-Tay's been homeless. Have you guys?
I've been homeless, and I've been that person that Hortensia was talking about. There were moments when I was wandering down the street waiting to jump in front of a bus, but a bus never came. And moments where I would do a shot and just pray that this was the one, and it never happened.
Yeah.
And now I am so grateful that it didn't.
Yeah.
You know.
Whenever we drive to the radio station, we drive through a part of town before we get to Maryland Parkway. And I see people who look like the lights out in their eyes, and their lives, their whole focus, what's going on. And I remember so much. It's something that's so like, it hits me every time, because I remember my own experience, not that I had the experience of everybody else, but I remember my world. I remember how it felt. I remember how limited I felt. I remember feeling so depressed and hopeless, and just kind of, taking my little life and putting up curtains and calling it, I'm good, I'm surviving, I'm, this is, I'm doing well enough. And I see this, and I think, I was a really low bottom. I ended up with epilepsy from it. I did not have epilepsy. I feel like I might have had genetically the predisposition to have epilepsy that was just activated by just complete neurotransmitter burnout. But I will say, like, I see people who are burnt mentally, fried, neurologically, just, needing so badly to have a different way, but not even getting to a place, because it's such a slow cook of feeling anymore like they want to change it anymore. It's like, so this is when, drugs, if you think that you're okay when you're taking drugs, I always say this, ask yourself, ask yourself, if you continue to take the drugs or do this kind of behavior, whatever the behavior is, what is the trajectory of your life?
Right.
Do you feel like doing what you're doing? Do you really honestly feel like in 5 years from now, if you live that long, right? And just have an open mind. Don't let your ego answer, because your ego is going to want to say, "Shut, I know what she's talking about." But sure, but actually, like, ask yourself, am I going to have truly a freer life, a more empowered life? Am I going to be healthier for this? Is this really me fighting the fight? Or am I just saying this is what I have to do because whatever I think is so important to me in my life, this is the reason why I have to do it. Like, you would do it too if you had my family.
Yeah.
And you would do it too if you had my trauma. And you would do it too if whatever.
That takes a moment of clarity, though.
Yeah.
And that's, to get to that place. And,
clarity comes often, though. When you're in drug addiction, you have moments where you're tired and you're sick and you promise and you pray and you say, you know what? Even if you don't believe in God, you go, get me out of this. Help me. I'll never do this again. And then... And then,
you sober up.
It wasn't so bad. You know what?
And that's the point.
I made it. How bad could it be? I'm alive.
Yeah.
Well,
There was 10 minutes of fun before I blacked out.
That was not so bad.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why it's important we have to be meeting these individuals where they're at.
Right.
And I
With
know a
no
lot of people
judgment.
say, exactly,
With no judgment.
And honestly, I remember everything you remember too. I also remember not trusting
Anyone.
Anyone.
And so I actually go out quite a bit with a few different organizations on outreaches into the tunnels and under the bridges.
We're going to be doing an
like
episode on that.
Beautiful.
On the tunnels. Yay.
Yes.
I'm so happy.
And I don't work with them. I work with a few different organizations. But we go out, we have to start building that trust with them.
Yeah.
We have to start letting them know that we are here.
Yeah.
That way, like you said, those moments of clarity come often, and I remember they do, but if you're not there to get it, that moment's going to pass them.
But there's something so powerful about somebody in recovery who has been everywhere, done everything that they did, thought the things they thought, and can say, listen, I know what you're going through.
Right.
There's no difference between the two of us.
Right.
There's only one difference, and that is I'm a little bit further out of this than you.
Yeah.
You know, and so come with me. There's hope. There's a way.
Yeah, and there's that also that piece of like when you first get into recovery, when you first stop using. I mean, like I've talked about it before, that my goal in life was to turn 25. I didn't think it was going to happen, you know, and the life I live now is so beyond my wildest dreams that when I talk about it, people are like, it's not believable. I mean, like it really isn't, you know? And
Right, they don't think we ever had a problem.
They don't
like
believe
we
us.
clean up well.
You look so normal.
Right?
Yeah, we clean up well.
What do you mean homeless? Like
Yeah.
what's your version of homeless? Sitting in your Cadillac, girlfriend? I don't know.
Yeah. No, but like I mean, I was homeless with a cat. Like, I mean, like it was, you know,
Oh,
I was
excuse me.
ridiculous. like,
Homeless plus.
yeah.
They should come up with a word for being homeless in a car, like like homeless but car. I don't know. Carful.
I don't know.
Okay.
But what I was going to say was you talked about, those nights that you would take a bottle of pills and wake up the next morning and be like, what did I do wrong here? Because I wasn't supposed to wake up, you know?
Yeah.
And what's interesting about now, and you guys were talking about a little bit about like different types of treatment. And I know we've talked about this in other episodes before, but like there's so many different avenues to getting help for opiates now. Like medication assisted treatment is just so much makes that withdrawal so much easier.
And we just did a whole episode on that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and there's so many different pathways, like you were saying, multiple pathways to recovery. There isn't just 12-step. There is SMART. There is physical activities such as yoga, exercise. There's entire groups dedicated to exercise, and that's their pathway of recovery.
And therapy, there's all kinds of different ways to get help. Yes. And like I know that there's still a stigma, but the stigma is not as great as it once was because of things like dope sick and like these different things where it's like putting out in the light, like this is not something that just affects the homeless person. It is someone that affects the doctor that gives himself some drugs to get through the surgery. Like it's something
this is so true. We have so many nurses and first responders in recovery.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pilots,
police,
to treat all of them.
Yeah.
It's just everybody. I think also the 107,000 people that had to die for us to start awakening, wake up, and we need to do something massive.
Yeah, so if you think that because you don't know anybody that died from an overdose, that it can't be that bad what you're doing, you might become the person that everybody sees die for them to get something, for them to get help. So
true.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. I'm so excited, and you guys can come and join us at the meeting space on November 19th and November 20th, Saturday and Sunday at 2 to 3 in room 104, where we're going to have, I'm going to be there, where we're going to have these trainings, and I'm excited about that. So you can watch us on Facebook, YouTube, and on Amazon Fire TV. You can listen to us on the PHLV radio app, or you can get our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. And all of our episodes, of course, are going to be on the meeting space, and you can go at any time. And thank you for joining us today on The Real Recovery Show. We'd like to give a special thanks to our sponsor and gracious host, PHLV Radio here in Las Vegas. If you're interested in being on one of our shows, please go up to themeetingspace.com and fill out an intake form or contact us through the contact form and let us know what kind of ideas you might have. There's so many shows coming up, and we're super excited about all of them because it's a wide variety of topics that cover everything in recovery. Yeah. So thanks for joining us. See you next week.